Hello, ladies and gentlemen of YouTube, and welcome to another Fanalysis Star Wars Jedi and Sith role reversals. I'm Reti 4, this is Evan Nova 95,
Hello.
and this is Greyjedi 91.
Hey guys.
Let's take it away.
So, starting off with our first Jedi turned Sith character, we have Jaina Solo Fell, the Sword of the Jedi, who in this context would be the Sword of the Sith, which just sounds amazing.
Yeah, she's an interesting one. She's one of those characters that I spoke to Matt about this kind of idea relatively recently, talking about Harry Potter, how certain trios kind of fall under the kind of archetype format of the heart, the mind, and the body. With Jaina being the body of her particular tripod, obviously Anakin being the heart and Jason being the mind in that scenario. With that said, it kind of Jaina's the one. She's forthright. She's honest. She's earnest. She does things. She will decide I want to do this, and she will do it. Twisting that into the idea of the Sith, it's difficult for me to see where that would go, like outside of just the generic Sith ideology and approach, because she doesn't really have like core defining personality focuses, if you know what I mean.
Mm-hmm. Well, in that instance, I mean, you have to also remember that Jaina's always kind of had a bit of a temper, even in her later years. So I could definitely see her acting like a lot more impulsive, because that's always kind of been an aspect of her character.
The emotional
so I could definitely see that.
The emotional fluence.
Yeah,
of it,
exactly.
Yeah, how she does kind of just let go a lot of the time. That's definitely a thing that would be amped up. And I can certainly see how that kind of, as with all of the characters really, would be that kind of personality element that would be changed and shifted. But I'm not sure about her, core drive. What would be the thing that makes her a Sith, like so many of the others?
Well,
I admit to being less knowledgeable about her than you guys are. I haven't read all the material that she's involved with. But I remember that there was always enough to her that I wanted her to take center stage in a way that I don't think she ever really got to. And that just kind of that brings me to that question of like, I guess you can answer this like it might be easier to begin with what kind of Sith empire would she function well in, because that kind of was one of the thematic parts of our discussion that came up last time, and maybe that might help out narrow down what kind of Sith she would be.
Yeah,
well, the thing with that is I have a really hard time seeing Jaina as any kind of like ruler, kind of like what we discussed with Obi-Wan before. I think she'd actually function much better in almost like a Malgus role, where she's kind of like this, not so much a warmonger, but more like a, like a true like frontline warrior. Because like here's the thing, I'm not saying that Jane is like incompetent when it comes to like tactics and whatnot, but she's much more of she's a combatant. She's really not the type who would, be comfortable managing a vast empire.
Yeah, precisely.
She's more of like an enforcer type.
Yeah, definitely.
She's a boots on the ground kind of do it herself kind of person. But that with that in mind, I also don't think that she'd be the kind to kind of take orders from others. As a Sith, I think that she would be fiercely independent. That would perhaps be the streak that is kind of defined most by or redefined most in her character, because she is always very independent in her material. And
True.
Speaking of material, by the way, you said she didn't get to take center stage. She should have had that damn Sword of the Jedi book.
Yeah.
Yes, we all regret that never being released.
Yeah, I know at least 4 people that aren't involved in our little council discussions at all, like longtime friends of mine. I mean, that are all lamenting the fact that was never published.
So annoying. But as a Sword of the Sith,
so close too.
Yeah, I know, right? But as Sword of the Sith, how would that materialize? Because I don't think it would be a case of her, she's listening to someone else telling her to go and do this. She would need some form of spark to drive her, and I don't know what that could be for her.
Yeah, and that's my biggest issue is like I know what her personality type is. I know many of the accomplishments she's had. I know like key events she's been involved with. But when it comes to like what would be her, she's a very proactive character, and it feels funny to say this, but I just don't know what her drive would be. I know she can get the job done. I just don't know what job she would want to do. Yeah. See, generally Jedi are told they're given a mandate, or they feel like a call to their duty. Whereas Sith, they need to be either subordinate to somebody who says go do this because this, or somebody who has that inner passion or fire or a fear motivating them to get this done. And I don't know what that would be for her. I really don't.
It's difficult.
You said about the era thing, the era question. Where would we place her as best functioning as a Sith? Because Rule of Two, I think, is written out. I mean, she'd be a great Rule of Two Sith, but I just don't think that she would have the interest per se as a dark
No,
side.
she really wouldn't.
She's more of a, as we said, I don't want to say simple because that's not what I mean, but she's more rooted in her own life. She's not looking beyond. I want to, because great big legacy planned out. She's not. I have this philosophical drive behind me. This ideology appeals to me, and I'm going to follow it. It's just a case of no, I want to do this, so I'm going to do it, and she does it very well. There's that. Fate on the face of it, kind of a thing with her. And I don't know what that would be. That would look like outside of the generic I'm evil and emotional as a Sith.
I guess maybe she's one of those people that kind of maybe would be like a poster child for that sort of Jedi almost oversimplification about like how the dark side will like warp you into like a monster basically, whereas we know that's a little bit oversimplified. Like there are Sith that have kind of a point, but maybe she wouldn't have one. She might well be one of those Sith that really just goes hog wild with the whole darkness thing and doesn't really function. That wouldn't manifest that much outside of the realm of just making her insanely scary as a combatant,
Oh yeah, because she would be that.
Definitely.
Don't want to encounter an evil Jaina. That's for sure.
No.
Yeah, but
it is interesting to think about though, like if she had turned dark in the NJO era, and her and Jason's positions had been altered. Not so much swapped, but altered, because she wouldn't go down the same path he did.
I think it's in that regard, it's the Obi-Wan Nomi comparison again that we made last episode. She wouldn't have as big a galactic impact, but as an individual, she would be a far more terrifying.
She would be much scary. She'd be much scarier than Kaitis ever was. Not that Kaitis wasn't intimidating in his own right. She would just be that much more intimidating.
Yeah, like I say, she's the body rather than the mind of the group. So that would manifest as such. But yeah, I don't see. Outside of generic,
I guess she would
nail it for that one.
There are plenty of Sith who have been described as more or less living weapons. I suppose, the sword of the Sith might well,
might well be a living weapon and nothing more, which does kind of fit the philosophy of the dark side in some senses if you look at it a certain way. So I guess that does kind of work.
Yeah.
I guess she would, in a way, she would represent sort of like one of the apex manifestations of an aspect of the Force. Like she wouldn't be the ultimate Sith in a philosophical sense, for example. She wouldn't be the most interesting. But just when it comes to pure combative power and ability and just that sort of focused and driven mindset that she has, she definitely would be cut right from the cloth of one of the staples of the dark side.
Well, I don't think there's too much we can say more than that then, with her in particular.
Yeah, it kind of sums it up.
Yeah. Still interesting though. I would like to see that cat. Well, it's different from how I would love to see the Nomi story of her being Empress. I would like to see the kind of glimpse of her.
Ooh, like if there was like a time warp where you had one like Nomi in charge and Jaina as the Darth Vader to her Palpatine, that'd be horrible.
That would be brutal.
Be amazing.
I couldn't imagine a worse duo, to be honest. If you went for pure Force juggernauts, because they're the two
that'd be pretty bad.
Sides of the kind of Force development. Pure mental mind dominating spectral Force energy style power versus pure physical.
I'm sorry. I apologize. I just opened the door for somebody to request that versus video. Apologize.
Oh boy, here we go. Yeah, it'll happen.
But yeah, anyway, next person on the list.
That was Satele Shan.
Yeah, it's another highly requested one.
Yeah, another interesting
This one's
one.
really interesting because, as we kind of discussed, before we started recording this, Satele Shan's not exactly what you'd call a super deep character, and I'm not saying that to be offensive or anything. She's just very, I don't know if generic would be the right word, but very. Help me out here, guys.
To some degree, that's fitting. I mean, she's.
Yeah.
We were trying to think about like what is her defining feature, and if you really think about it, it's her devotion to the Jedi Order. She's like one of the ultimate Jedi. Like, and even though she has a fairly unorthodox biography in the sense that she's a mother, where most Jedi aren't, and she has a very interesting family line that she comes from. she herself is she doesn't really put a toe out of line. You know, she's very standard Jedi. She's just extremely powerful and important, both within like the internal politics of the Jedi Order and like to the wider galaxy. She's an important character. She's an insanely powerful one, but she's a Jedi. You know, there's not a lot to her personality.
It's her defining trait. You know, the fact that she is devoted to the Jedi way, which from a character kind of narrative perspective doesn't make for too much of an interesting intricate weave. It's just a case of, oh, this is the archetype. This is the Jedi. Great to see, and it's awesome, but there's no uniqueness to it because there are so many of her type. Maybe not to her level, both power wise and actual depth of devotion, but it's a flavor we've seen before in so many different instances. But
it's interesting though that if we're talking about, sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, but I was just going to say, switching to the Sith side. But if we switch that to how she would be as a Sith,
that's what I was about to transition into as well, because when we look at like the marketing materials for like the Old Republic era, or that game specifically, it was natural and in some ways almost like this. It felt this intentional push on the part of like the people who made the trailers or the people who designed box art and cover art and so forth to sort of juxtapose Satele with Malgus, and they both kind of had that going for them, in that Satele is more devoted to the Jedi Order and its teachings than she is to, well, like anything else, even her son. And Malgus cares more about, say, the dark side than like the Sith mantra. You know what I mean? So they both have like that kind of I don't know what you want to call that flavor to them. Like there's they feel like this higher calling, I suppose, and almost like vessels of like the Force or avatars. You know what I mean?
Vessels of their orders as well, because Malgus is very Empire centric, and she's
he is
order centric.
Yeah, he is, but it's almost like at some point for him it's like mandate from like his order it's like Qui-Gon, like it's secondary to like his Force given mandate, whereas Satele has like the same devotion, but it's tied to like, it's not from like the Force, it's like the Jedi Order. You know what I mean?
Yeah absolutely.
It's a weird inverse because normally that's like swapped, I would say. The enlightened Jedi cares more about like the Force than say the Order's codes and teachings, and like the Sith are a little bit more. You know what I mean? It's like this weird...
I completely agree. Particularly from that era, the Jedi Order from the Clone Wars would be perhaps a bit different by and large. But where from the Jedi we've seen from that era and previous, you're absolutely right. She is the
If you really, for that reason, if you really swapped her and like gave her Malgus's position, she would be arguably the more dogmatic of the two, because she would be more likely to care about what the Dark Council thinks or what the Sith Emperor wants, or you should be more about like the Sith Order than the dark side of the Force, if you get what I mean.
Yeah, no, I completely.
She definitely wouldn't like stage a coup like Malgus attempted to do in the latter portion of the game.
Unless she would, because I mean, we know that she had some tension between the leadership of the Jedi when it came to the war front. There may
Well, no, she didn't have. It wasn't so much the leadership of the Jedi; it was tension between the Jedi and the politicians who ran the Republic.
The leadership and how it was run as a whole, basically. But how that would transition in from the Sith perspective, which is much more one and the same. In that regard, it would be interesting.
I could maybe see her having like being devout to the Dark Council, but maybe having issue with the actual like Imperial hierarchy, like the Moffs and all that. Possibly something like that.
Apart from anything else, she would almost certainly be on the Dark Council before long.
Yeah.
So there's that to consider.
Definitely.
How do you reckon she'd approach that? Would she be the political kind of schemer, or the "I'm more powerful than you, get off my seat" type? Because I could see both ways.
Both. I could kind of see elements of both taking place.
You see elements of both, but I think she would. I think more inclined toward the former. You know what I mean? Like she knows how to play that game and would be inclined to, whereas Malgus doesn't really know how to play that game, and so
he admits as much,
like chooses not to. And he's powerful enough that he doesn't really have to. She's got like a foot in both realms. And it would be probably should do whatever was most convenient in the moment.
True. Yeah, I can get that.
I could definitely see her being one of the more long-term members on the Dark Council, because it's noted that like a lot of the people who have those seats don't keep them very long because they get. Yeah, I know exactly, but I could see her being like one of the few, kind of like Darth Maul, who's able to secure a seat for a long period because she's so cunning and powerful.
Well, yeah, you're not going to be kicking this person off their chair for much. She's too insightful and perceptive to not see any plots coming,
Exactly.
and she's too powerful to not take on the brutes that don't even try for that kind of subtlety.
It's interesting to think about. Like, these are good storylines because there could be people they're like, oh, she's just here because of like her name is famous, and she'd be like wanting to prove herself against that, and she'd probably want to distance herself from her family line and earn her place on her own merits.
Yeah, there's a lot of like intricate.
It would be interesting how the Revan name would influence her development in the Empire.
I think that would be probably the most interesting thing about that story, to be honest, because the tie to heritage and the callback to who her family have been, it would be much more prevalent in the growing up.
It's virtually irrelevant as a Jedi, but it would be more relevant as a Sith, I would think.
Yeah, it would be a huge.
Especially in this case, because whether you like this plot element or not, it was Vitiate who quote unquote created Darth Revan. So.
Sort of. Yeah, I like.
Well, like in the broadest possible sense.
I like the fact that there's just enough to like the other material that you can kind of construe it that he more or less finalized what was already going to be, which is the way I prefer to think of it as. But it is. Yeah. But
we're speaking about family. How about going the other way? What do you think the kind of story with Theron would be?
Well,
she'd probably get. I mean, since he wouldn't be force sensitive, and that's kind of a,
big deal.
No in the Sith hierarchy of that era, she might. I mean, I hate to I hate to say this, but there's a chance she would just kill him at birth or something. Like, seriously, because that actually happens.
That's possible. Like, there's pretty much 3 routes. That's one of them. That could happen. Another route is that he would never been born because his father is a Republic soldier, and unless she slept with him for like, some sort of espionage-driven mission to get close to the enemy, like that probably wouldn't have been a thing in the first place. Or if she really felt that he might be useful, or if she felt like if she felt like she could use this for something, he'd be the same thing, just the dark side version of it. He would be
Imperial agent.
Yeah. So you guys don't see or don't think it would be likely that she would be one of the types where, as a dark sider, she would be more possessive and more emotionally connected to them.
I don't think so. Well, because
I don't think so.
She can't wield her force-driven influence through him on the future because he's not force sensitive.
Hmm. Okay,
it isn't.
She wouldn't. She wouldn't like value him in that same way.
Well, because I don't remember it. Because there are certain characters. Sorry, you go first.
Just that unless I'm remembering it wrong, it wasn't that he walked away from that path. He just never could have walked it. Like he's not force sensitive. I don't think.
That was the impression I got, by and large.
Theron's not force sensitive at all.
So we don't think she would be one of the types to just care about him because she cares, and anyone else who tries to get in her way can die for it. There's no emotional side for that.
I don't think so. Given like the hierarchy of that specific empire and the emphasis they place on certain Sith families and your bloodline, I think that would get in the way.
I see her having enough sort of, I don't know. There's enough going on that I think if she saw value in him, she wouldn't view him as like an embarrassment, like a Tywin Tyrion situation. It wouldn't be that. She wouldn't hate him or outright despise him, but he wouldn't have value to her unless she could use him for something. Mm-hmm. And she, even as a Jedi, she's clinical and driven and as tied enough to her order to have distanced herself emotionally and physically, like from her child, basically for his entire life. Mm-hmm. So as a Sith, it would be like the same sort of extreme neutrality, unless you can be of use to me,
Yeah, see, I can see the neutrality more than distancing by kind of inclination, because she has she did say that it was one of the most difficult things she ever had to do when as a Jedi. So I could see there being the same thing for the Sith with that frame, the whole neutral aspect.
But the Jedi way, it's like that's more. It's more tied to like maternal instincts. Like with you letting go of your child, it's gonna be tough, and like of course it'd be tough for her if she's doing it to serve her order. But as a Sith, like they would discourage that anyway. that's a weakness, or like especially like a non-force sensitive child. I mean, like, what do you? And with you have like a war to wage too. Like, what do you really do with this child? Unless it's something like that sort of interesting storyline that we got with Valkorian's children, where it's like these are tools, or are you grooming them for something? Like, are you going to hand this off to them? Like, whatever the answer is, none of those really apply to the Theron Satele relationship. She doesn't really, unless he's useful to her, like a tool. Like, I don't think she would necessarily hate him by design, but I don't think unless she saw a use in him, I don't think she would really value that attachment or connection at all. To be honest,
I can see that. Yeah, I definitely.
I agree. Yeah,
as a neutral element. Yeah. Yeah. So I think that's interesting. How she's more of a. I think you used the word clinical. I think that's definitely where she would be with that. You know, she would be the focused kind of blend between Palpatine and Plagueis as a Sith, mentality-wise, not how she manifests. Just on the Dark Council.
Yeah, she's definitely somebody who, like to use that term, can play the Game of Thrones, and also she can get her hands dirty because she's a good combatant, so she can function in both of those realms. But she would definitely be more of a Dark Council master. You know what I mean?
Yeah, fit the mold, definitely. Well, that's Shan.
Sure, Dan.
Well then, yeah.
Right.
Moving on to
and then we
the most
have
interesting for us three, I think.
Yeah, Anya Kuro, who was already known as the Dark Woman, even among the Jedi.
Yeah,
the
so
even
you already,
darker woman.
We're starting off on a great foot here. Yeah,
her as a Darksider, I think, would be one of the most terrifying we could possibly see. From the nature of her.
It'd be pretty scary. Yeah.
Yeah, the nature of her mentality and how it lends itself to the dark side.
Like the interesting thing about her in that regard is it's not really so much about what she would be capable of personally, which is still a great deal, mind you. She's a very capable warrior, even in her old age. But it's more the mentality she has and sort of the far-reaching impact she could have, which is very different from like the political ruler of the galaxy, because she wouldn't be that, but she'd be an expert manipulator. Like that person, she'd be a lot of people have done this. A lot of people have requested a video, a versus video between Anya Kuro and Traya, and she would be a Traya type when it comes to manipulation.
Absolutely. It was the first thing that came to my mind when I thought about it, getting ready for this episode, was like, well, immediately Traya comes to mind. She's not as high-minded, philosophical type as Traya, but as you said, the way, specifically when it comes to manipulation, she would be very much like that. She knows when she needs to be soft-spoken. She knows when she needs to hammer the points in. Just the points would be very different.
Very, yeah. What were you going to say, Evan, a minute ago?
I was just saying, like, another thing to consider would be her personal philosophy, because one of the big things that makes, Anya Kuro who she is like utterly devoted to the Force, to the point where she feels that a Jedi should have no possessions whatsoever, which is why she ended up giving up her own name. So it's interesting. What would be interesting is to see if she would still have that same devotion to the dark side, or if she would be more Traya-like and despise the Force in a lot of ways.
That was the other thing I considered, how her zero attachment would manifest in the dark side of the Force, whether or not that level of fanaticism almost would attach itself to the philosophies of the Sith, or whether or not it would stay the same and just shift to the refocused kind of darker equivalent. I don't know how that would go. What do you think, Matt?
Sorry.
Oh, go ahead. If you have, I can say it afterwards.
No. It's good. It's good.
Okay. The thing about her is, I feel like she was not brainwashed by the Jedi Order into thinking the way she did. I feel like she was just such a hard taskmaster and was given so many of like the hard cases of the Jedi Order that she just really fell back on that. Like this is the way it is, and it's like sink or swim. And I'll give you the instruction you need, and I'll test you now. But really, it's on you. It's on your own. And so I don't really think that because we see her question this, like in the wake of Aurra Singh's fall to the dark side. She reflects on that, like, what mistakes have I made, or like what have I done to contribute to this, or like she's sorry for some of it. So I don't think she would be. I think she would be more Traya, what Traya really wants is to destroy the Force. We know this. She's not really a Sith in the traditional sense. She's on that path because that allows her to exercise her power in the way that she needs to pursue her ends. But she's not really Sith. Not really, not in her heart. I think that loose description would also apply to Anya Kuro, because if she's willing to question the Jedi Order's codes, even though she was like an apparent hardliner of them, like publicly, in her heart, she's more introspective about it. I think a dark version of her would be a more dark Jedi than Sith. Do you know what I mean?
Oh yeah.
I don't think
yeah,
I don't think and by that I mean I don't think she would be married to the Sith code, you know.
Definitely. I don't see how her personal creed could in any way fit the Sith code personally. In terms of how she lets it feed her power, I definitely think she could shift in that direction, and very easily actually. But when it comes to the creed itself, the mental kind of gear turning that lets you drive yourself forward on whatever path you've forged for yourself, I don't think that would fit her, and I think she would actively oppose that by just from day one. You know, it wouldn't be a case of, oh, I disagree with this, I'm going to step away. It would be a case of, no, this is not how I'm doing things. I'm doing it my own way. How do you think that would manifest though? What would be her life story as a Darksider?
She's the kind of person that it's almost impossible to know exactly what she would choose to do in her off time, because she was such a mystery even to her peers. Like there were times where people like the Jedi Council wouldn't hear from her for years and assume she was dead, and then she'd walk in like, hey, I'm here, it's because this cause is important to me, so I'm here to make a statement. And they're like, we thought you were fucking dead. You know. And so it's like it's like she's so enigmatic, you know, and so does things her own way, that really I wouldn't hazard a guess at what she would do in her off time. But I will say that if I was a Sith Lord, you know, and I was the head of like an academy, I would do anything in my power to get her to teach for me. You know, I want you to teach my students, like, because she could whip them into shape. Like she's the drill sergeant and a half. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Yes,
definitely. How you mentioned before about how her abilities would manifest, and how she's definitely a powerful warrior. How do you think that her more esoteric kind of abilities in the Force would manifest as on a dark side level? Because she has some strangely, like, her best abilities are abilities that to everyone else, or as far as we're aware, everyone else thinks are impossible. You know, being able to phase through a wall and basically teleport and control plant life at will. You know, these are things that
she's inarguable, by the way. It's inarguable. She can do these.
Oh yeah,
like,
these happen.
Yeah, these are not like our interpretations of what happened. Like that's literally what she's doing.
Yeah, and the fact that she does it so not casually.
No, when it comes to, well, I will say
she's not surprised by this. You know, these aren't her major feats.
Well,
she just does them.
Sorry, I'm just gonna address the plant life one. Like that's an ability that is not linked to her specifically.
Oh, no, that definitely is less of the esoteric, but it's one of the big ones in that kind of particular scene.
And that one has also been, at least in various RPG guides, is explicitly stated to be a light side ability that was more commonly mastered by Ithorian nature priests. So probably not something she would either be capable of, or at least not have as much facility with if she was dark side. I just wanted to take that one off her palette of abilities.
Definitely.
But the other ones, what they really would do, and that's what I was getting at, is I don't view her as like this dark force goddess who can just steamroll over the galaxy, but they would basically make her impossible to hold. You know what I mean? Like she'd be one of those threats that's very difficult.
Literally walk out
the cell
like
door,
you know, through the wall. Yeah,
that dark kind of smoke that you constantly try and grasp and just flutters away to seek, you know.
She'd possibly be the most elusive person, you know, like in the galaxy at that point.
The elusive woman of Mass Effect, effectively.
Right.
Yeah. That could be a role that she'd fill if she so chose.
To be honest, I'm kind of picturing something somewhere along the lines of like Lumaya, where it's more of a case of, like we've discussed, less wanting to rule the galaxy and more, you know, lurking in the shadows.
Influencing chess pieces, turning people into chess pieces from within like the shadows. Yeah. I don't know what her motives would be.
Yeah,
like
that's
I said,
the thing.
Because
what would that be to the end? You know, what's the end goal?
Because Lumaya did the thing she did because she had like she utterly, completely despised Luke Skywalker and his family, and she wanted to hurt them as much as possible. That was her.
Yeah, she's got like this vendetta, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
But that wouldn't be the case with
That's what I mean. Is like
she doesn't have you know,
right.
in terms of her attachment thing, she wouldn't have the attachment for a vendetta. You know, she's more.
And Kreia was driven by what drives humans, like like an existential crisis. Like that's what her problem was. She was like doing everything she could do to address that mental problem she was having, basically, and decided to make everybody else's problem as well.
Yeah, exactly.
But Kiro, like I don't know what she would do, because I don't know. Like I said, I kind of started that off with, I don't know what she would choose to do with her own time. But I know that if I was Darkseid, like I want her on my side, and I don't want to piss her off.
Yes,
like I would
definitely
be trying to make her my ally, because otherwise she could screw up my plans. Is like what I'd be less afraid of her personally, even though she's very capable. There's somebody who stood up to Darth Vader for quite a period of time, but. I'd be more worried about how she could fuck everything up, like out from under me, if I angered her, or if she chose to,
For any Metal Gear Solid fans out there, I've always likened Anya Kuro extremely heavily to the boss from that game series, as mentality and as based on personality and drive, and they're very akin in many ways. Looking at that from this side, from the Sith side, her ability to manipulate and to maneuver and to cause trouble for whatever people she happens to decide to do that for, it would be the defining trait about her. She wouldn't be, she would be the Dark Woman. There would not be a core, and she would not be the Sith Lord of this, or she wouldn't be,
No.
she would be this ethereal background
scenes,
shadow.
yeah.
That no one knows who it is. No one knows if they even exist, where they go away, when they come back, why they do these things. They're this power that just does it, and not in the the evil.
She has. Sorry, I was just gonna say she has basically every like power you could imagine. At least not necessarily like does she take it to the nth degree, but it's open to her. You know what I mean? And there's no capacity that she can't function within. She could be a warrior, she could be a drill instructor, like she can be a saboteur, probably a really fucking great one. She like she can function in any capacity you need her to. So it's kind of like she's one of those blank canvases. You could tell any story you wanted around a dark Anya Kuro, basically.
Including motivation wise, she has that going for her. Anything that happens to take her fancy at the time, there's so much you could do with her. To the point where she's actually fascinating. On a galactic scale, because she wouldn't be this great, galactic manipulator, but in terms of her ability to influence galactic goings on, she would be unparalleled if she wanted to.
Right. Yeah.
Sorry, Ivan, what were you going to say?
I agree with that.
Sorry, Ivan, what were you going to say?
Oh no, I was just going to make a comment. It would be interesting to see an encounter between Dark Kuro and Thulm, given their quote unquote friendship.
That would be interesting. I think there would be a conversation. I don't think there would be a conflict there. I think she would have a conversation with him, and he'd either try and stop her and fail, or they'd just leave.
Right. I was going to say it better be just a conversation. Otherwise, he's a bit out of his depth, I must say.
A little bit, yeah.
But yeah, that's an interesting one. It's very, like you said, I think blank canvas is the term to go with her, because there's just so many possibilities, and with no real understanding of the motivation behind them that could be done. So it's an interesting one.
She's just so versatile and enigmatic. You can't pin her down, and she doesn't. That's sort of what, even as a Jedi, because like Jedi kind of have like this connotation of they can be a bit boring. We kind of got to that a bit with Satele. She's sort of like, she's arguably one of the most interesting Jedi there is, because even a light side version of her doesn't really fit any archetype that I'm familiar with.
Is called the Dark Woman. That doesn't sound like a Jedi term. If you just said to someone, who do you think the Dark Woman was? Oh, well, it must be a Sith or a Darksider at least.
Anybody who's watching this who's unfamiliar with her, we highly advise you look her up, because you're really missing out.
Yes.
Oh, yeah. A lot of really great stories revolving around her.
Absolutely. Go and look her up right now after you finish watching this video. But speaking of that, let's switch over from the Dark Woman to the dark side, or light side in this case, which is Darth Maul first, yes?
Right. Yes, now, we should have established this beforehand, but Maul, like in his entirety, like canon Maul, or
good question. Both,
because I'll be honest with you, like after it became clear that they brought him back from his supposed death on Naboo, I more or less lost all interest in this character. So
Trust me, it didn't get much better.
Let's go classical
I know
because we have
I know
more
the
of
Cliff
a...
Notes version of what he's been up to, or what happened to him, and I'm not impressed. But
yeah, I'm right there
yeah.
with you. Let's go with the classical more because I think that's the thing that defines him most as a character. Everything else comes up and makes him a bit more not generic, but more standard Sith. So let's focus on up to Naboo.
Well, what I think would be interesting about like examining particularly this era of Maul, like if he were a Jedi, is the fact that Maul's upbringing really like essentially what Palpatine did is he just stamped out any semblance of individuality and just made him a living weapon. Like that is it. He is.
Yeah, we said it earlier.
All
he is.
He
is the perfect
example. He has little to no individuality, very little personality. So if he were a Jedi, I mean, he wouldn't even be recognizable. He'd actually be allowed to be his own person. So, which would be very different to what he was. And what's interesting is it's hard to imagine what he would be like because it's like you're going from nothing to
something.
Something.
Right.
So
That's
it's like
he's
we really don't have much reference here. Yeah.
It's one of my early introductions to the character, aside from like the movie, is the novel Darth Maul Shadow Hunter, where he is more or less just the Terminator. Like the story is basically the Terminator. He's trying to, he's chasing. Yeah, it is. It's one of the best looks at Coruscant that out there, in my opinion. For anybody who like, not to get too sidetracked, but any KOTOR fans, it's basically like how you have Terrace with like the upper city, lower city, and undercity. There's that, but Coruscant in that book. And you get a good slice of all of it. But anyway, getting back to the topic at hand. Maul, like in that book, he's chasing like a group of heroes, and he's basically just like this relentless pursuer, and all he does is get pissed off at himself when he fails to catch them, which is just a shade more than a Terminator, because a Terminator would be neutral about it. They just like resolve to do it, to keep continuing. He has to kick himself and then get back up and then continue doing it. That's it. He is, as Evan put it, just a living weapon in that iteration of the character.
Yeah. So again, like what would he be like? Like, well, it can't manifest in the light because, like we said, he would actually have he'd be his own person. So,
well, I mean,
I guess it depends.
Are there any examples we can think of?
I guess you have to ask yourself. Who would Maul be if he had never been indoctrinated?
I suppose he could be more or less anybody, but he does have sort of the classical Zabrak traits, that sort of the very
drive.
Very dry, like drive and like the discipline, and also kind of dry personality. Like they feel more than they let on, kind of like a Vulcan.
I was going to say stoicism would probably be a big part.
Yeah, they're very stoic people. Yeah. But I guess I see no reason why he wouldn't be just as martially, obsessed as he was. Yeah. Like even as a Sith, he'd definitely be going along that.
Zabraks are very physical people.
Yeah, yeah, he'd definitely keep going on that same route. I suppose he'd probably be, whatever his personality ended up being, he would just be incredibly driven and. Well, he has that sort of weird code of honor, that would probably still be a thing. That's one thing that would carry over.
I think another factor to consider is who would end up training him would probably have a big impact on him as well.
Yeah, we're just mulling that over.
Maybe another Zabrak. Maybe maybe if Eth Koth was his master or something, that could be interesting.
I think based on Maul's potential alone, he'd probably outpace Eth Koth. It would be a poor place potential-wise, I think.
If this is like a way of like sort of saying like the idealized Jedi version of the character, and if you gave him a master who could have treated him as a person and built up his particular skill set, I might place him with Windu.
That's what I was thinking. Yeah, it would certainly help with the martial kind of
would be
enjoyment.
It would be a badass
Jedi Maul with claw pad. Oh my lord.
Ooh,
that's
an interesting question by itself, right? If we're going with the idea of putting with Maul, with Mace, do we think he would be able to handle Varpad?
Well, I mean, that's the thing is, like, I kind of prefaced it with like, if this is like an idealized version of the character, because we can't really know mentally. Like, who? 'Cause that's kind of what we were getting at.
Yeah, how he would.
What
shape.
is his personality? And maybe not. Like, maybe not. Like, if the character was written a certain way, that might be a mistake, or that might lead to a fall. But if he didn't have any sort of emotional baggage, if he'd been raised a Jedi from birth, if he didn't have any kind of weird trauma that beat the compassion out of him, the discipline side, I would say, yeah, probably more so than Deepa or Sora. He might have a better chance than they did.
Zabraks are very dedicated, very focused people, so it could work.
Yeah, I think the discipline and the Zabrak passion, but angled towards devotion, towards the Jedi and towards his master, probably. I think that would potentially keep him from falling if he's channeling the enjoyment of his combative focus, which is what Vipard essentially is at its core. But again, I think you're right. It depends how much of the devotion shapes his character compared to his more raw, passionate side.
Yeah, I'm just thinking I would say that he has as good or better chances as the other two people who tried to master it and fell to it instead. So, I mean, I wouldn't count him out of the running automatically. I mean, it might not work out for him, but I do think that it could. I think it's at least a dice roll as opposed to
possible,
automatic fail.
Yeah,
because he even amongst the Sith, he has an admirable level of discipline, like an extremely so.
At least this version of him. We'll get to the other one in a minute.
This version, this version of the character. Like don't confuse the two.
Yeah, no. The good version.
Yeah, no. Yeah, so is there anything else you want to talk about for that one, or that's pretty well covered?
Should we talk about the other version of him now?
I think there's going to be people who want that.
Yeah, let's do it then.
I feel like it's at least worth touching on just briefly.
And it's not. I don't have good reasons for not covering that, other than that I don't like that character. So I mean, we can address it.
Yeah, the problem is that essentially it comes down to the same thing, because the basis for that character was the Maul we see in A Duel of Fates, and that character wouldn't have been put in that situation, which then completely is what makes the next iteration. So if the Duel of Fates didn't happen, then it wouldn't manifest the way it did.
Yeah, the thing that I imagine many people liked about Maul was like that sort of quiet badassery that he had, in that he was almost content to live as a living weapon, or like he understood his place, whereas this Maul absolutely did not, like at all.
The narrative, he now his philosophy.
He became somebody who held pretensions of becoming like the dominant power in the galaxy seemingly overnight. And not only did he not have the ability to back that up, he didn't have like a compelling or charismatic personality that I even wanted to entertain the idea of reaching that status. So
you never really wanted to root for him. That's the thing.
Yeah, even though he retained his combative prowess, like he just kept falling on his face, and it was almost hard to watch.
Sad. Yeah. It was
even
pretty
right
sad.
to the end. That's the case, especially in Rebels.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh, I would say most especially so. I can barely tolerate him in Clone Wars. As of Rebels, I'm like, oh my god, what are you doing?
Yeah, that's just sad.
I don't even watch Rebels, but just from what little I saw of Rebels, I was like, oh, this isn't the character that I liked. Yeah.
It is a strange.
Trust me,
one.
Trust me, even if you watched it, it doesn't get that much better.
But wheeling it back to how he would be as a lightsaber, I think we can't really distinguish the two, because, as I said, without the Duel of Fates, that Maul doesn't manifest. So how?
The reason the distinction I see is more like operating style, because the sort of admittedly the Jedi version of classical Maul that we floated out is a bit vague, but it's more cohesive, like to me, like that vision of the character. Whereas this guy, he became like a half-baked schemer, who, and not a particularly good one, and a monologuer as well. Like I just.
He did, yeah.
That it's just a bizarre character to think of as a Jedi anyway, or a lightsaber. Yeah.
I guess, yeah. He'd probably be more generic in that regard. I mean,
it's
hard to see him as a successful supreme, Jedi master when you look at that in iteration than it is the original. Purely because of the focused kind of precise line of his character, the kind of narrative that was being told with him. It's all because it's all over the place in the future works. That all over the placeness kind of takes away the believability of the drive that would push him to the upper echelons of the Order. He would just be similar to Nile, where we placed him in terms of achieving. He would be someone who wants to achieve, but would just.
But even
fail
him,
to.
it's like
the one thing I will say about Nile though is that even though that character, even as a Jedi, may be a bit of a tryhard, he wouldn't be goofy about it. I don't know. Like this character was straight up, just goofy, and it's like, what is the Jedi version of that? I hope it doesn't exist. I don't want it to exist. Like that's the thing.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Maybe we should just leave that one buried.
Leave it hanging. Let us know what you think in the comments below, and don't judge too harshly for our opinions of Maul in Clone Wars and Rebels.
I mean, we all have our tastes.
We all have
our tastes, guys. Yeah,
yeah, exactly.
I'm a fan of Darth Maul, and it's not a canon versus Legends thing. It's really just a matter of taste, and they may as well be two different characters, and I prefer the old one.
Just the presentation of it as a whole. But moving on from Maul, then it's the next.
I think it was Zanna.
Zanna,
right?
That's the one.
Like,
yeah, that was the order.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Darth Zanna, who is a.
Now, sorry.
No, it's fine. You go ahead.
I'm just saying this is another really difficult one to imagine because, as Matt pointed out in our first episode of this, Zanna had like a malicious streak from pretty much day one.
Yeah, and
so it's like.
I want to kind of preface this by saying that just like as friends, we have discussions off camera, of course, and like probably a couple of years ago now, I had a talk with Callan where he seemed to be, and you're here, Callan, so if I'm saying this wrong, go ahead and contradict it.
I'm here.
He seemed to suggest that had Bane never encountered Zanna, she would have been a lightsider, or and I was like, well. I think you're giving her a little too much credit in that regard, or something. I don't think that Bane needed to bully her too much into choosing the dark. I think she was open to that on her own, which isn't to say that she couldn't be a Jedi. I wasn't optimistic about her chances in a vacuum. You know what I mean? I don't think she naturally leaned toward the light and not the dark. It doesn't mean that she couldn't have been a Jedi though. Had events gone differently in her life.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, see, the way I've always come from it is that you said about leaning. To me, she leans towards power. Now, the argument I was making was at the time, I think, was that she wasn't, to me, a true Sith in the sense that she buys into the philosophy. She buys into it because it gives her the power. But I genuinely feel if someone came along and kicked the crap out of Bane and said, here, this is how I did it, I follow this philosophy, she would jump ship from the Sith to that philosophy immediately. Now, how much of that could be applied to being Sith-like? There's that argument to be presented, but for me, that's how she operates. She's only able to go along with that kind of view and mentality for me, which may be Jedi
I felt
if you wanted
I guess
to.
that's probably true what you're saying, but it's just so hypothetical. I mean, like.
And the thing is, Jedi don't like value power in the same way the Sith do. So even if, like, say,
at least they don't brag about it. Yeah.
Well, yeah.
But
then, imagine that situation, Cal. Like, imagine if a really powerful Jedi came in, kicked Bang's ass, took her to the temple, and was like, "Okay, now we're gonna teach you restraint." She'd just be like, "What?"
That's the thing. That's a good thing because, like, what you said, Callan, is like, I know that you as a person aren't saying that it's this simple. In your example, but it is that situation is one that would never happen because a Jedi would not be like or I lost it. I had a good way of phrasing it. What's the thing? They wouldn't be, they don't relish in their ability, you know what I mean? So they wouldn't be like, come with me and I'll show you this power. That's never been used as like a hook, line, and sinker to take. Yeah, it's never been given as a strong incentive to join the light. Like, they don't do that. They just don't do that.
And didn't say that to Luke in the hut.
Completely agree, and I definitely don't think in that example the person who beat Bane would have been a Jedi. I mean, even if it was, it wouldn't have the same appeal. Yeah. But it was just a case of that was where I took root of my idea of her not being a true Sith in the sense of, Bane very much buys the philosophy of the Sith. I mean, he redefines it and drives it forward to what we know to be the rule of two. But for me, Zanna was never along for that ride. She was just there because I want to be as powerful as possible. This lets me do that.
But see, I feel like that is true as a child, but
not in her later years.
Yeah, she grows to accept that, or she comes to believe that as strongly as her master does. I believe. I don't think any of that's a front. I think that the climax of Rule of Two and what she chooses to do to her cousin and so forth proves that. like what's important to her in life is definitely the Sith way.
It was definitely a defining moment for her, yeah. But to me, that was again born from her focus on power. She wanted, no, I have to do this to get my ultimate goal, rather than I want to do
bear
this.
in mind, bear in mind, Callan, in that very novel, she does sort of see Bane get defeated by a Jedi, but she doesn't.
I suppose circumstances shift that.
I think.
From the...
Well, I mean,
I think
I know
it's
what you mean. I know what you
hard
mean,
to
though. But yeah.
I think it's borderline unacceptable to separate power from Sith when it comes to like I don't think she leans towards dark or power from dark. You know what I mean? Because that is sort of like that's sort of one of the keys to the dark. Like that.
Yeah, definitely. No,
angles.
I buy that she would almost always be a dark sider. Just to me, that was. But
that's what I mean. If you lean toward power, then you are open to the call of darkness. You know what I'm saying? Like you can't have the other statement. Oh, you can lean toward power and not feel the call of darkness. I think you have to, in some sense. If you're leaning toward one, you're leaning toward both.
You're definitely easier to go. You're definitely going to fall easier. That's for sure, because the temptation's there. But
I do want to regroup on this because we've been talking more
back to the point of this light side Zanna.
Yeah, so it's like I brought that up again more to establish the fact that I don't think she can't be on the Jedi the way that I kind of was arguing that case with Plagueis last episode, where I was like, I don't know about this. I could see her as a Jedi. I just don't think she was naturally predisposed to it. But anyway, what do we think?
She would definitely need a lot of discipline.
Yeah. Well, I mean, there's the aspect of her when she was a kid. We said before, as a kid, she was a much more conflicted person, much more malleable. In the way she could have gone, how she was, looking after her cousin, and even giving him what he thought was his own force powers, but it was actually just her supposedly manifesting around him. That I see that character. That's the first step that you could take and put in the Jedi system and see her grow. How that would come about, come the end of her days, I don't know, but. That's something I think you could fit into that mold and see her grow through.
Well, that's sort of an interesting thing, is that she might be an interesting sort of buffer, like in that, like she makes the group stronger that she's around, like maybe almost like the effect of battle meditation without even needing to.
I need healing.
Yeah. just intuitive battle meditation. Yeah, that would be interesting.
That's the other funny thing, and I don't know the answer to this. Is there a light side manifestation of Sith sorcery? Because that's one of those.
There's a light side manifestation of sorcery, but
I can't think of an example. Where is that brought up? I'm not disagreeing.
Like casting illusions and spells and stuff like that.
Yeah, but that's that's more telepathic influence. There seems to be
the
line of demarcation is difficult, but there is a vague distinction between Sith magic and dark side abilities. It's like a subsect. In the lore.
It's weird. Yeah, there doesn't seem to be like a direct sort of corollary or whatever to it. Yeah. I mean, and Bane really thought about not even, letting on about it. Like he is, I have no answer for this. Like in my sort of normal like branch of powers, when he handed her that tome of abilities, like this is what you can do because you're born with it. So it's like, does she then just cancel out an entire branch of her potential on the light, or does that manifest in a different way? I would like to think that it manifests in a different way, but I don't know the answer to that.
It's possible. I mean, I could definitely see her like mastering a lot of like esoteric light abilities, maybe just in a different way, illusions and battle meditation, teleportation, that sort of thing.
Yeah, maybe she would be a Kuro type in terms of her force abilities.
Is that what Kuro was? Maybe that'd be interesting if that was confirmed. I kind of wish it was now. Like if that's what she had been. Yeah. Because it
makes sense.
Her abilities are so rare. In some cases, more or less unique to her. Like that, it's like, oh, maybe that's what that explains, or that we never see these because it's light side. She would have been able to use the same abilities in the dark. By the way, this is all speculation. Viewers, we're not saying that this is the case.
Of course.
But I just want to make it clear for the viewers because some people misconstrue. But yeah. I mean, I'm not quite sure. So that sort of speaks to her level of ability. what do we think she would function as? Like, what would her role be within a Jedi Order?
I could definitely see her being.
Well, she'd have to be consular.
I'd say either consular. What?
The nature of her, excuse me, the nature of her abilities and just innate biological kind of leaning would push her towards the consular life and how it manifests the Force. But it's just a case of the level of that and the shape it takes in that kind of sect. I don't know what function.
We talked before about her being a good support role character, so.
But how would that work? In terms of her personality and character. What missions would they send Zanna on?
Well, she would be a fine field agent. Like, she's very competent, and like the thing is, people often, or at least I think it's easy to forget that we're almost always constantly comparing her to her master. Who's like this physical, like physically unparalleled specimen. Like almost. Like he's just like this ridiculous juggernaut of a character, whereas she's just average Force wielder, but she's not. She's very high level. She just looks average next to him. But yeah, I mean, she could function perfectly well as a field agent or a more bookish type if she wanted to. That's kind of what I was asking.
But Zanna
would be badass, actually.
That would be kind of cool.
But, that is, I did kind of want. Like, I was so disappointed in the Revenge of the Sith video game when Jocasta Nu pulled out her lightsaber, only to be like instantly swatted. Yeah. I was really hoping she was gonna be like this badass old lady, like, you're not getting the Jedi knowledge or what, and it turned out to be just like, get out of my way. But to somebody like that who could actually back it up, I will say though, like Callan a few minutes ago, you said that her focuses or whatever her natural power would push her more toward a consular lifestyle, I think you said. I think actually, ironically though, like because she developed her skill set as a Sith with the idea that she wasn't really going to be an overbearing swordswoman, she actively falls back on using her offensive force powers. So her lightsaber technique was kind of it wasn't like it was an afterthought. It was anything but that. It was just meticulously constructed. But yeah, well, it was a means to an end. It was like part of, you know what I mean? Like she didn't rely on that to get the job finished. It was like what she used to buy her time so she could finish the job using other means. She wouldn't be able to do that, I don't think, as a Jedi, because she wouldn't have the same offensive force abilities. So I think she would need to push herself to be a more capable swordswoman for sure. And I think she could reach that point.
I could definitely see her being a lot less over-specialized. That's for sure.
Yeah, I mean, Ceresu, there's nothing wrong with that, but she would need to have something else. Not. She would need to have something else in her arsenal to be able to take the fight to somebody else.
Absolutely.
Actually have an offensive output.
Yeah, I should specify I don't know why I said it any other way, but I meant with consular would be how her abilities would manifest, how her.
You didn't. I wasn't correcting you. No. I just was adding on to that point.
Because of what we discussed afterwards, I think it'd be more apt to say that I would see her in the Sentinel role, as in she's, you said, a field agent, subterfuge, that kind of action she would be sent out on to do and perform. But in terms of her abilities, she would be more in line with the consular's style.
Point. She'd almost switch classes, like where she's like sort of like a Sith sorceress, almost in a classical sense. She'd be more in line with like a Sentinel, like on the Jedi side, even though she still has great power in the Force. Yeah,
it would be how she's shaped and how she then uses them. But before we end off with her personality, I don't think she's ever going to be particularly friendly.
Not well. I mean, but if she
cordial, but I feel like that would be her.
But she It's funny because I was arguing about how she had this mean streak in her earlier, but now I'm saying, well, she did have a friendly bone in her body when she was younger. She was fairly normal, but it's just that she had she didn't need much prodding to go to the dark side was my point. But she had that not happened, she could be perfectly friendly, I think. But I think she wouldn't. I don't think she would have that Yoda enlightenment ever. Like, I think she would always have like that very human quality to her. She'd be one of those Jedi who they may be fine and everything, but they're flawed people, or they might argue with something they don't agree with, even if it's like from an emotional standpoint. But that doesn't make them bad Jedi or people. Just not stoic the way we said about Jedi Maul. I don't think she'd be very stoic. More interesting, yeah.
Yeah, no, that's interesting then. Because I can see, like I said, I definitely see her as being cordial and measured and putting up not a front as in like a deceitful way, but just she would be kind of reserved in my eyes, and more focused on what she's doing at the time.
I view her as being more outgoing than you do then, but that's just differences in the way we take the characters.
I have to go back and reread the book actually because I've not read that for a long time. I may be mistaken on that front.
Or more outgoing and outspoken, I guess, is like my point there. I would view her that way.
Maybe kind of like Siritachi like.
She'd be stirring up debate, I think. Like if she felt that there was one, not for the sake of creating controversy or whatever, but just if she felt there was something she needed to say, she would.
Yeah, but actually, that kind of situation. Yeah. So, anything else, or is that Zanna done then? Moving on to our last.
That's about it for me.
I think that covers everything. Yeah.
Okay, last character then. Darth.
Wyyrlok. Right.
The third.
No, we picked these. Yeah, the third. The third of his name. We picked these selections from like the list of comments, like popular suggestions that you guys gave. And I'm imagining that this is built primarily from the fact that he was also in that picture that sparked this whole thing in the first place. But yeah, he's sort of one of those characters that I didn't care about him for the longest time, and then all of a sudden he got interesting. And so it's like it's really cool to think about him now. But for a while, he was a very cardboard cutout.
One Sith sort of.
Yeah.
Yes, my Emperor, that sort of deal, yeah.
But when we find out what really drives him, that being basically somebody who actually is married to the Sith code, I guess you could say, how would that manifest as a Jedi? Would he be like a hardliner with the Jedi code, do you think?
I
Possibility.
would have to presume so, yes. What kind of characters can we see would be, could we hold up with parity to him if he was a light
I'm actually getting some Nostoral vibes, given like his predilection for history and literature, but devotion to the code and all that.
I think that's probably the closest one, actually.
Yeah, it's a very good comparison. I can't think of anyone better for that. Certainly not in the main, thriving Jedi eras.
Especially because they're like bookish, solitary figures who don't see combat all that regularly, but they can throw down if they need to.
Very much so.
Yeah.
And
boy can Wyyrlok throw down.
And Drul turns on turns on like the menacing face and like, I am a Sith Lord. Here, let me show you. I can see Wyyrlok being that type. When even on the light side.
Oh yeah, definitely.
There's a certain sense of theater to Wyyrlok, I think.
He has a grim quality about him that I think would still be there. Like even if he was a Jedi, he'd be one of sort of like the way that people describe Mace Windu. Like that would still be there. That aspect of his personality.
I'm just imagining him like going through a book one day, and then some annoying Padawans like asking him questions, and he just closes the book, turns around. Yes. Yeah. It's over there. That sort of thing.
Definitely the snippy type, that's for sure. But
yeah.
What would his focuses be? What would his drives be? As a Jedi, how would he, spend his career?
Thing was,
I mean, just hardcore historian and literature master. I could easily see him heading the archives, which is basically what he did for Crate anyway. So
he would definitely be doing that, or if not that, then he'd be doing that out in the field, like being an archaeologist or something, collecting more data to bring back to the trove. But the only reason he betrays Crate is because he honestly thinks that's what's best for the Sith when he does it. He actively thinks that Crate is being a hypocrite and is no longer worthy of the mantle, so he only does it to serve the Sith Order better. It's not for him. It's almost he's the Sith from that time period that Bane would have appreciated for that reason. Even if it turned out that there's a differential like their power levels, at least philosophically they're perfectly in line. So as a Jedi, if he was really married to like the Jedi Order's codes and just the way they conduct themselves in the hierarchy, he would be just like a straight up Jedi lore keeper. Yeah, without much ambition to be anything other than that, and he would just do his duty to the best of his ability through and through. That's basically what he would be.
He'd probably get really annoyed with like Anakin Skywalker. You know?
Oh yeah,
Who doesn't?
It would, yeah. And again, that's kind of in line with like the personality type for Mace. Like you know, he wouldn't have much time for that.
Take a seat, young Skywalker. It would definitely be his style. In the library, you know, Master, can I learn this? Sure. No. Sit down. Read the book I told you to read. I can.
I do think he would also probably be on the council. You know, like
Jocasta Nu, you know, was on the council, retired.
Yeah, Jocasta was actually
focused on what he was interested in.
Mm-hmm.
I can see.
And
that.
Also, and the truth is that like he's very powerful. Like even though he's not like the main Sith of his time, like he's still up there. You know, I would say. At the worst, he's hovering around somebody like Dooku's level, which is very high.
Yeah, I'd put him a little higher personally, but yeah, still.
That's debatable. Yeah, I mean, at least in the realm of Force ability. I wouldn't say so with lightsabers, but
yeah, I could agree with that.
But yeah, I mean, he's a character, or he's a Jedi that I don't think would be, or he's a character as a Jedi I don't think would be all that interesting in terms of personality, but he'd be like a major player within his era, and definitely somebody you wouldn't want to cross.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. It's his position and his effect on the roles that he's serving, rather than his
in other words,
and personality.
Yeah. Here's a good way of putting that. There are a few Jedi that it's not that Palpatine feared them, but they are people he needs to get off the board if he wants to get anywhere. The
problem people.
He'd be one of those people, I would say.
Yeah,
definitely.
Too perceptive or too well connected with the wrong people for anyone to leave him there, you know, sitting at the edge, potentially causing problems when the hammer comes down. I absolutely. Just even outside of the law keeping, you know, capable ability of Wyyrlok, it's his personality. You know, he's perceptive when it comes to that sort of thing. You know, he's ear to the floor kind of thing. He's very smart. I don't think that Crate was even smarter than him. It's just that Crate had an out. You know, Crate overpowered him, or you know, like he didn't really outsmart him. You know, and nobody else had any hope of doing so. The closest would be Malady, but all she did was see through the facade. She had no backup plan. So yeah, he's a very intelligent character. He's again a character that functions, even though he is played up as a straight up Sith sorcerer, so to speak. He really functions as something in between the two extremes, you know? Yeah, definitely more inquisitorial in terms of how he comes across than anything else. Just not his perception, because you know his personality is very much the opposite of that.
Yeah, and it's funny because he's a character that literally faded into the background when he first arrived, and like at one point was like the steward of the galaxy from the Sith perspective, you know? Not a very long period of time, so tumultuous, but it could have been. He easily could have been had the story gone differently. Yeah,
had the era worked to his favor.
He is, in my opinion, you know, Dark Lord material. You know, he's got the temperament and the ambition to do that.
I can see that. I wouldn't say one of the most prominent of the different eras, you know, lined up. He would definitely be one of the kind of, I hate to say low point, but baselines for the Sith. But yeah, definitely he would serve. He would definitely do the job. And I don't think many people would be able to do more for the Order and its future legacy if he was in charge than anyone else. You know, like you said, he's devoted to duty. He's devoted to the Sith as a system. He would do a lot for them.
I don't think
another thing to consider.
Yeah. Sorry.
I was going to mention we should probably also talk about his daughter and his relationship to her. You know,
yes, because he was one of the exceptions that we mentioned last time when we were talking about them having children. He's one of the few that does.
I like to think
how that would manifest in the light.
I like to think that he would try to straddle the line between his duty and also being a father, whereas like Satele chose one and neglected the other actively. I like to think he would try to do both.
I could see that, yeah. She'd probably be his apprentice, you know.
Yeah. It could be. I mean, he seemed to care for her, which is odd in and of itself, considering that they were both Sith and both would have understood sort of the codes and tenets of their order, generally prescribing against that kind of an attachment, but for very different reasons from what the Jedi say. But he sent her away not because he thought she'd be a burden, or not because he didn't think, like he didn't have any goal other than protecting her. Like that's it. Which I think says a lot about that relationship. I think he did care for her.
Mm-hmm.
It would be interesting to see what the story would be told there with him in the light, and how his Jedi self would deal with it. I think you're right though. Definitely straddle the line. I think he would definitely be someone who struggles with it as well. It would be an interesting point of contention in that, because we said about how he's so duty bound, because the idea of a duty bound Jedi conflicts with the idea of being a father, unlike the Sith, at least in terms of the systematic kind of level, if not philosophical. It would be interesting to see how that manifests, in his character, and how that struggle plays out.
Arguably, like Jedi do this anyway. It's just that care they have for another is like a surrogate son or daughter that they find in their Padawans. Even somebody as sort of ostensibly cold as Mace cares very deeply for somebody like Deepa, views her as a daughter pretty much straight up.
Yeah.
So yeah, I could definitely see him I could definitely see that relationship not changing that much, ironically,
Have a lot of Padawans as well. That's something we haven't mentioned. I think he would definitely be one to take a lot of Padawan in his time. To train train a lot of middling Jedi.
He'd be a good teacher, definitely, given his vast knowledge base.
We haven't really touched on that with the other characters. We should probably do that moving forward, I think. See how their students would thrive.
I felt that way a little bit about...
I don't think Jedi Zanna would ever take a student, personally. Just saying.
I'm not sure. Could go either way on that one, I think.
Yeah, I think I don't feel strongly one way or the other about her.
Maul would definitely be a saber instructor, that's for sure. He'd be
great,
kicking the crap out of all the Padawans. Teach them a lesson. Yeah.
And that's kind of what I was getting at with Darth Kuro, because I think she'd be doing the same, as just to the Sith apprentices.
Yeah. And in very different ways, yeah. No, that'd be interesting to see. Yeah. But anything else you want to close on with them, or is that us wrapping up now?
Nope. Just as always, give us more suggestions, guys. We did pull these from the comments. These were all suggestions. Yeah, there are some that if it seems like we're ignoring them, we're not. We're just waiting till we have more people like Connor or Jen Sarai or maybe even Antoine, if they're characters that we know they like and they might want to contribute. But other than that, it's all fair game. We're only picking popular answers. We're not ignoring anyone in particular. We'll get to them eventually.
Absolutely. Just a matter of when. But with that all said, let's wrap this up. I'm Reti 4, and I still don't have an outro.
Evanova 95. We hope you guys enjoyed. We'll see you guys later.
Greyjedi 91. Take care, guys. Thanks for watching.
Goodbye.